wasn't even looking at the time. My clock tells me it's 2 minutes to go, and I wasn't even looking at the time. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Well, here we are then. So a few seconds late. Rich has kindly joined us. Josh is with us, and of course, as ever, Bruce. I think the first thing that I'd like to ask Josh about was the AUVSI show. I think you were there. What was it like? Oh, who else is joining us now?
I'm an alien to that country, so I fit amongst the group of people that wondered why it became a political anti other company event. It seemed like I think a lot of the topic was about how political the opening speech was, and then
I didn't hear. Was it?
Oh, it was like there's a quote online. They republished the CEO of AVSI where if you're not on our side, be aware that the industry is moving forward without you. And like one of the keynote sponsors was a company that works with DJI, so that's kind of funny. You'll take their money. So I asked a comment on LinkedIn like, "So why'd you take our money?" Like we work with DJI. I also work with American companies, and then I think this show. There's a guy. I think he calls himself the Drone Geek. Chris. He used to work at the droning company, helps out at Dragonfly, and he's kind of been around. He's a very knowledgeable guy. He posted an article yesterday I was reading about how AVSI, like in the main center, it looked a little busy, but when you got out there, it was empty. Like I was only there for one day. We've downsized our booth 2 years in a row now just because we don't see the traffic. And I think from my colleagues' comments, day 2 and 3 were pretty empty, and like vendors were just kind of kicking tires, bored. And so, yeah, it's one that I think with AUVSI, they've chosen a pathway, right or wrong, whatever. They've chosen a pathway on where they want to sit and what they want to do. Maybe their members are telling them that. I don't know. It's definitely not the end users. And I think that's where you're seeing divides like LEDA, Law Enforcement Drone Association, these different groups, drone responders, where they're actually platform agnostic, are doing a lot of good work. And I think AUVSI is just they've chosen a path of pro-America, and they're basically saying, yeah, you're an enemy if you're not. And I think the show, like I heard a lot of comments like Europeans didn't feel comfortable being there. There's a lot of people that said, why would I go spend my money where I'm not welcomed? And AUVSI has gone from industry to politic lobbying, and I don't know, we'll see in 3 years if they're relevant again, right? Because administrations change.
Sure. Yeah. You could see from the Phillips reckoned it was quite groovy, and other people said it was quite groovy in different stands. But then you looked at other sets of photos and thought, where are all the people? So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, like I felt like there was a decent quantity of booths, but the attendees were empty. So like as a component manufacturer, sure, I can when there's no one walking the floor, I can go bug manufacturers and say, hey, do you want to buy my parachute? But when they're there and they've spent 20, 30, 50, I don't know, a lot of money to be there, and they don't have end users coming up to them. And I think this is where, like, I know for us, we're stopping doing the general trade show, ComUAV, AUVSI, these general shows. And we're more focusing on smaller ones where there's, 200-300, but really engaged. Like we're in Utah, we're going to Boston, very law enforcement specific niche. And I think for our products and our market, that makes sense. And so, yeah, I don't know, like, en français, raison d'être, like what's the reason to exist? And these trade shows are revenue generators for them. But like, I don't know, like if I'm not showing up if the end users aren't there, right? If I'm not making my money back within a certain time frame. So yeah, trade shows, yeah, I agree that they've been overhyped. They've been really good for us a couple of years, but I think AVSI has chosen to be so political, and they're being called out, and they're not acknowledging like their, intellectual honesty, I think people have said. And it's like, let's figure this out. But yeah, AVSI, I would say, what is it? One of the movies, they're like thumbs down. I would do a thumbs down on spending money there next year.
Well, the real question is how difficult it is to sneak in if you're going to talk about something controversial.
Well, funny you should make. And I think, hang on, let me get that. Let me get why you're saying that up here.
Say that one more time, sorry, I didn't hear that.
You go again, Ian. You say.
I was just saying how difficult it is to sneak in there and say something controversial. It sounds like if there's lots of empty areas, it'd be quite easy to sneak in.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I appreciate that. I actually was reading his comment last night, and I was wondering if it was going anywhere. Can you pull up like a live view of it right now? Is it?
Oh, what's his name replied? Yeah.
Oh, really? There's some drama.
Yeah, there's some drama. Yeah. So I'll be honest, I'm unsure where your frustration is aimed. DroneX, the DFT, the CCP, the award, or myself. Your comments and reposts feel quite personal and therefore only fair to address things clearly. You're invited to speak by a UK distributor that sponsors the proposed talk. Comparing Gatwick to Hillsborough raised valid concerns due to its sensitive nature. We flagged this professionally with your distributor and have agreed the talk would be revised similar to your edited posts, and so on and so on. You can let me put this link to this in the chat for everyone else. I'm not sure. What do you say to this story, Ian? So basically, Q Pilot's not going to DroneX next year. So there you go.
By not going, you mean they're not allowed to go? I feel a bit sorry for Philip here because he was doing the right thing. I mean, to be honest, DroneX weren't. I mean, obviously, I've never had anyone discuss anything with me about it. So they don't really. I mean, I don't see the fuss because obviously I put on LinkedIn. The context of what I put was perfectly fine, and I verified it with people, and I got people that are Liverpool football supporters even to read it before. Because I'm talking about when I mentioned about Gatwick, and this is only one tiny bit of and a large post, was to do with the fact that it is and was then a relevant topic given the fact that it was being proposed that we'd have the Hillsborough law, which is along the kind of the lines about transparency and underlining stuff that should have already been adopted from the Nolan principles. So really, it's backing those up about transparency, professionalism, all that kind of thing. So when an incident occurs, and that you share the learning from it and all that kind of malarkey, it was kind of in that context. But they kind of focused in on that as an excuse and suggested loads of people have complained. Well, I don't know anybody. I've spoken to people around the industry, and no one had any issue with what I'd posted or with Gatwick being discussed. So the information that had got to me via what had been said to others was that the CAA, DFT, and Home Office had complained to DroneX. But until DroneX is quite straight about it, about where this came from, who's complained, I don't know. Those authorities won't provide anything on subject access request to kind of confirm or deny really if they have done that, other than saying they can't find any evidence that they did, which kind of really doesn't mean they didn't. So it's. I mean, to be honest, I don't think that other private sector companies aren't going to be in the least bit bothered. People have said about DroneX that it should have been sort of broadening its horizon, who it attracts, to get more general people in there, and they do that by having talks about drone-related topics that aren't just dry and here's my product I'm selling, discussing an actual event. And Gatwick, obviously, as was proven by even Arpaz coming out afterwards and saying, we agree that this was never, there wasn't likely a drone there, and there just hasn't been the transparency there should have been. So really, the entire industry. So FPV UK have come out, Grey Arrows, the works have said that they don't buy the Gatwick narrative, and worse than that, just going off slightly, in the last few weeks. I think Richard, it might even be at the IAG, that the DFT turned up, did an email in advance of turning up, and said that their justification for RID was Gatwick, and then were challenged on that by email and decided not to reply. So this shows that even now, we're in May 2025, and it's still being used to batter the industry. So it was very relevant to me to be saying this is a topic we should be discussing. My talk itself is, just completely matter of fact about what was revealed on Freedom of Information. Then Joan X went to the point, and I just think this is just complete drama and nonsense, to be fair, and they're welcome to demonstrate otherwise, but said that they had to put on bag checks. They feared such violence from me talking about Gatwick. So, they made it out like we were getting security and we're doing bag checks. Hey, they didn't do very
you
good
don't
work.
you don't want to be associated with us lot. We're dangerous.
So yeah, for me, this should have never have been any drama. And to be fair, I'd kind of slightly kept out of the debate backwards and forwards. So I was kind of copied in on it, but I just tried more to diffuse it. But Phillips won, obviously the Australian, where he'll say as it sees, and he wasn't happy because he thought it was an important thing for the industry for it to be discussed, and didn't understand the drama. And obviously none of us understand the drama. And I'd say all day long there was nothing in my post that warranted any drama, and I edited it immediately anyway, so it was completely irrelevant. But it is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, it's their show, and if they don't want people in from it, and they're upset about it, then they can be. But I don't think it does them any favors in the long term. These are the kind of things where you could just it's done nobody any harm, and they could have just.
All of
these have been sorted out.
You get put in jail for hurty words over in England, don't you?
Yeah, but yeah, these weren't hurty words. These were just as they always are. If I'm going to put out on LinkedIn, my name's on there and whatnot. I'm not going to put anything, even on Twitter. I don't put anything daft. It's matter of fact. I'll have a little bit of a joke or a laugh, but it's all very innocent. And most it'll be like a meme or something, or as you've seen with like Lake and Heath of that.
999.
Yeah, with Lake and Heath and that, I'll do a joking YouTube video and stuff, and a bit of a what do you call it, deep fake stuff. But it's all everyone knows what it is, and it's all tongue in cheek, and that's the most anything ever gets. So,
but don't forget, when I did a meme, the CIA called the police in New Zealand.
When
10 minutes.
Rich is going to run away, and Josh as well. We're not good people to hang around with, plainly. I do worry this. Yeah, everyone is. I should
just
cool
add,
when you're living a dream, or whatever the Lego song goes. I can't remember how it goes.
I should add
awesome.
to finally wrap this up, as it shows that my views are not in the least bit controversial and are well informed. I've had within the last 6 months, probably the last 3. So I've had a BBC using my knowledge for a story and specifically citing me and validating what I have said. And I've had the Telegraph within the last month. So national journalists now do speak to me and will quite happily cite what I have to say. So
yeah, being cited by the BBC is no endorsement, mate.
I would like to comment either way on that. But there you go. That's it's a shame it's come to that. I was kind of hoping things would sort themselves out, but it is what it is. It won't. I mean, it's probably. I feel a bit more sorry for 3DXR because they're the ones kind of caught in the middle here, and I hope Ben's not too upset about it and doesn't get any. It doesn't affect him. I wouldn't have, in the long term. I wouldn't have thought it would. And this year there is at least the Autopilot conference at the same time in September. That's up at 3DXR, and I'm trying to get kind of a lot of people in the industry to pop along there because it's in their interest as well, because people have only really had exposure, or a lot of people in the industry have, to DJI, and it's a really good opportunity to the most experienced Autopilot people in the world are going to be there, and actually you can see what it does, and you can even chat to these developers yourself and saying, well, I love this, but I really like it if you have this feature. You can actually prompt some evolution there.
Will EHang be there They're one of the biggest users, aren't they?
They are.
Ehang.
Oh, yeah.
No, I think you're right. But then Mads has been at the beach. I've seen the posts, so I'm joining the dots here, Ian. I'm joining the dots. On a Chinese beach with incriminating documents on him. What was that? The man in the Second World War that they did that? They put the documents on him, didn't
Yeah,
they?
the
on
man that never
body?
existed.
Man that never existed. Yeah. Look, I think it's time for the trade shows to. Well, there's if you're selling a service, if you're a surveyor or whatever, you should be at Surveyor World. If you're in farming, you should be at Tractor World. You shouldn't be at some droney show with lots of people that think they know what they're talking about. And if you're part of the community, and I'm talking out loud now, my feeling is if you're part of a community, you should be at a thing, and you're a developer and a flyer and a doer and a maker, then you should be at something where you develop, fly, do, and make. And that's what we go and see, a prove it thing, not this like, here's people with suits and massive claims. I see the claims that sci-fi thing are making are beginning to get a little bit outrageous, and they're worrying me. You know, they're exclaiming that they can lift 3 kilos 20 odd miles or something. It is like, that's not a
I
first.
see an opportunity here for Disneyland. We can have think that Fantasyland, you know, that part of Disney World where they have the perfect place for all this stuff.
Yeah, I think we've got FPV UK, we've got the other guys. They're in the comments now, aren't they? I think things need to change a little bit. But anyway, I digress as ever. So, Richard, you have been traveling around the world doing your thing, and you were recently at the big ATM conference. I forgot, Airspace World or whatever it was. What did you take away from that? In that you've been to all the recent ones, because I'm seeing sort of what looks like consolidation posts. This person's joining with this one, and this one within the ATM market. And is RID your fault? That's the accusation I need today. Is it your fault? Yeah, is it you?
I knew there was a reason that you'd invited
me.
No,
I didn't know. That wasn't the reason, but yeah.
Well, actually, I couldn't comment on the show. I've just been traveling around the world trying to put out all the fires that Ian keeps starting, if I'm honest. So
fair enough.
Personal press fire putter outer. No, you're right. So I just come back from Lisbon. It's my first time actually in Airspace World that I haven't been out there for the whole show. So we've got a great team. They put on a great show for everyone. Stan was insanely busy. But you're right. I feel like, probably the last couple of years, we've been seeing a trend towards more partnership announcements and more convergence. And I think that's just a recognition that, anyone who's actually trying to do frontier innovation in aviation is just going to struggle as a startup. It's going to struggle as a small business on the peripheries. Whereas you've got a lot of these big defense primes, a lot of these bigger companies, they can take a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year view even when they're making, different products through legacy aviation effectively. That's what props up their businesses. So there was quite a lot of, I would say, nothing press releases in that kind of regard, like nothing particularly exciting came out of this. We announced a contract with a major supplier, which was really exciting. But other than that, we weren't there announcing, brand new technologies. And actually, we didn't really see anyone in the UTM space doing anything broadly similar either. So it's interesting, hearing those comments around, drone shows and trade shows. There are, I feel like there must be 25-ish drone shows that we get invited to annually. And those are, I would say, probably the bigger ones. Obviously each country has kind of like a national drone show, and then there are these big international ones that people generally tend to attend. We generally have steered clear, probably for the last 4 or 5 years, away from a lot of the sort of drone operator focus shows. That's not because we don't love drone operators. It's just that they're not really our direct customers. So actually, if we invested in every single trade show to get in front of drone operators, we'd have been bankrupt on day one probably, because we don't monetize commercial drone operators. But it's very difficult to pick the signal from the noise, to use a kind of term that this industry will probably, will resonate with this group, and in particular this industry. Where we have been seeing a lot of, I guess, more uptake lately is in the sort of counter UAS space, I think that's driven by a lot of recent world events, the last couple of years in particular. Again, you got high.
Can I just jump in on that?
Yeah.
I do.
Whether I'm saying yes or no, so.
I was going to say, I think you need to set me up an affiliate code, quite frankly, because I do keep dropping in on the US side, including to the current director of the FAA. I do keep saying, you should have a look at those Arrow towers, since you've got a show looking at the counter drone stuff, because they really don't have an idea of what's going on in their airspace over there.
No, and I think it was the FAA that just announced. Someone in the comments will probably correct me if I'm wrong. I've got so much news in my brain from the industry, but I think there was a renewal of all primary radar in the US that was just announced. Something like over 200 radars are going to be refreshed, courtesy of the new Trump government. Which is, if you think about that is a massive spend. Radars are not cheap. $5-10 million a piece, depending on the type that you're going for. So, seeing over,
need to know where those aircraft are going down, eh?
Yeah, exactly. But the question is, no one's really sure of their efficacy in terms of this low altitude detection piece. Again, most primary radars aren't really going to do much below 1,000 feet, particularly if you're in a city or a dense area. So again, counter is coming in. And I think, coming back to those Arrow towers, one of the things we've been spending more time on is making sure that we've got good visibility, principally of general aviation, low-flying general aviation, or just low-flying aviation traffic in general. And then as a second category, and in second place, seeing how much of the detected drone picture that we can kind of figure out what's happening at that low altitude too. Again, that's the second priority for us. There isn't a sensor on the market that seems particularly good at doing everything. I can't see that changing anytime soon. But for our purposes, it works pretty well in terms of building a really high resolution picture of the low altitude airspace. But you're right, there's not a lot of information sharing going on at the moment, and a lot of regulators around the world do this. We all have this just culture. We like to share information, except if that information might give you an alternative worldview to the one that you're trying to push. And that's an area that we're certainly pushing quite hard in, particularly here at home in the UK, but also in some of the closer European states.
Yeah, it does feel like there's nothing new at the moment, which is, might not be a bad thing. Are you going to share an opinion of the rollout of RID with us, or are you going to be the company man? To be honest
with you, I try it whenever anyone talks RID, as in not this group, but whenever I hear anyone else talk about RID, I just roll my eyes. I remember starting the company 10 years ago, and back then people were saying, drones should all have transponders and beacons. I remember being as equally disinterested then as I am now, really. The only question I had was, what's it going to transmit? What's the identifier? And then my follow-up was, you tell me. Like, I don't really care whether it's a number or an alphanumeric string or something, but here's my list of preferences. I'd like it to be verifiable. I'd like to be able to query this. I'd like to be able to have some kind of cryptographic security in it so I can trust it. None of my wishes have come true. Absolutely none. But guess what's happening? RID's coming. And I think in the UK, the new kite mark stuff was announced, or the new hull marking effectively. And that's going to require network remote ID. And everyone's broadcast remote ID initially. And everyone's getting really, really excited about that, because it's all based on Bluetooth Low Energy, which has got like a 2 million kilometer to broadcast location or broadcast radius. Something nonsense that people writing the spec sheets, who are reading up about these fantastical isotropic antennas, which of course don't exist except anywhere on actual paper in a lab. Everyone is touting this as being the killer answer to making sure we know where everything is. And the reality is, anyone who's actually tried receiving any of these signals isn't going to be doing a very good job. And so that then leads you naturally to say, okay, well, we need to get to network remote ID, which is fine. And effectively, I'm sure other UTMs are very similar, but every single one of our drones has a network remote ID. The question is, what can we do with it right now? We use it extensively in all of our networks, but someone at some point is going to say, hey guys, could you turn your towers into broadcasters so that you can do the broadcast on behalf of your drones who are not carrying those transponders? But then again, the wider question is why? Who needs to know that information? I mean, we already know it. We've got it for our customers. we assign every object that we detect a random identifier, and then we keep that identifier for that vehicle while it's being tracked. It's like I say to a lot of people, I think RID is the answer, a partial answer to a security problem, not a safety problem.
Yeah, a quick question. What did you? Because obviously you've been busy, you might not have done. Are you involved? And were you at the last IAG, the MPCC one?
No, I didn't go to IAG. I've been relegated. I think I'm now in something called FIG, Future Flight Industry Group, chaired by the aviation minister.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just tell you the gossip that I've heard, and it's reliable gossip. I generally the drone grapevine is very, very effective. But the DFT sent a representative from Future Flight to push why we're getting rid, which obviously started with Gatwick, but then was quizzed about how the local RID is going to work, and DFT rep had no understanding at all, no technical understanding of actually what RID would actually do. Didn't know whether it would transmit the pilot's location, assumed it would all be encrypted and no one can intercept it, which is likely incorrect, and so on. So it was just, we've got these people, the DFT, and basically, as I understand it, the DFT are simply pushing this because we've got it in legislation and they'd have to repeal it otherwise. So we're delivering a system for the sake of delivering a system, because nobody wants to lose faith that we've gone down this path, or because we've made a business case around Gatwick that we have to put this in and it is needed for safety, which is essentially, it's a lot of nonsense. We know, as America has fantastically proven for us, it's of no practical use. It's inferior to DJI's drone ID that was already there, that our airports can already detect, that the police services can already detect. So you're putting in an inferior system for the time being, so somebody can consider themselves of having not lost any face. And I just think it's just a poor way. It's just poor value for the UK, for the taxpayer. And it just makes me go, oh. And again, I'm quite concerned actually, and I need to look at this some more. But obviously, I've got that many things on with freedom of information. I've only got so much bandwidth. But they even cite in the business case the cost that they claim the US network ID was going to cost, and I think it's actually a woefully underestimate of what it was going to cost, because what happened was, as they went through and looked at it some more, the cost went up and up, and I think it's failed to capture that. So I think it's probably low for that. And then DJI paid for an external economics agency to actually cost it all up, and it was 10 times more expensive than what the FAA had originally estimated, and that's why they didn't go ahead with it then. But none of this is captured in the UK case, so it's either you could argue it's incompetence or misleading, but we've actually put the case of it will cost this because the United States thought it would cost this, without actually capturing what the United States really thought it was going to cost. That concerns me. So I know from my business case to the rumours of where it is now, it's already grown 25%. So if you've not even written a line of code and the cost is already gone up 25%, that that already should have people, alarm bells ringing. I think this thing will turn out to be something really expensive, and it could be the kind of thing that gets journalists actually asking questions and causes embarrassment for the DFT, because there's nothing, especially you tech journalists, the likes of the Register, like any more than a very incompetently delivered IT project to discuss. So
it's a worry. It's a worry. It's definitely a worry. And then, well, for you, I'll talk for you then. I don't know that I should. But for you, Richard, then what I can see is happening is somehow the wider industry will think you are genuinely will think you're part of the problem. And look, this UTM must have demanded it, etc., etc., etc. I can see it causing a lot of resentment, and so and separate to that, and no logical train of thought. But I have to ask, why aren't they looking at your tower data? You must have lots and lots of it now. Why aren't they seeing the value in the system you've set up? Or are they, and they're just being very coy about admitting it? Or is it because they're terrified of upsetting their established radar vendors, etc., etc., etc.? Why? I don't understand. To me, it seems an obvious system, an obvious, sensible system. Why aren't they leaping at it? Or are they?
Well, they're not leaping at it. I think the only answer I could probably give, which is probably still a bit close to the wire, is there's just no one with a considered joined up plan operating in the CAA. That, it's just not there today, and it hasn't been there in the past decade. And I think that is stemming from a lack of leadership coming through in DFT. And that is the situation in the UK, but you could pretty much rinse and repeat that for most locations globally. I think the reality is the push for RID seems to be coming from, I think you guys mentioned Gatwick there as a rationale beyond it. But as I say, I distinctly recall, broadcast remote ID being talked about prior to Gatwick by some years. But, the push for that is someone's got to do something, right? And this is the best that we can do. I mean, quite apart, I think it was a couple of years ago, people like UAvionics were pushing and said, well, if you're going to do it, why not just broadcast on ADSB, right? I mean, we make these micro receivers. Everyone's already got, transceivers. We've already got the receivers. Just go put them on everything. I mean, I think that's an equally bad solution, but why not do it, right? Because it's cheaper for everyone to implement because we've already got all the receivers and all the hardware and everything in place. So like I say, I don't think that, I'm sure everyone who's doing these individual jobs in the CAA or the DFT have a really credible backstory for what it is they're doing, but they are missing the oversight. Someone who, I guess in the company you would say you're the portfolio manager, right? That portfolio manager has got a manifesto or something they want to achieve over 5 or 10 years, and they're busy lining up all of the parts. And I'm sure RID fits into one of these chapters, but I think it's been slotted into a book that hasn't been written yet, if I'm completely honest, because I come back to it again. This is not solving for a safety problem. The only argument I've seen that bears, any credence to a degree is that, well, if it's the law for everyone to carry it, then if you're not carrying it, then you're clearly the problem, right? You're the one that we want to focus on. Okay,
but the problem with that, just to jump in a second, is this, because this is the argument that's always gone to. That is exactly true now. If you're supposedly not a criminal now, you're not going to be on DJI broadcasting drone ID. So we've already got that ability in that if you are putting contraband into prisons, you're going to be, and we don't even have to debate this because we've seen the drones even in the last week, they're being captured. Interestingly, the drones that have been set up so they can actually bypass jammers that the Inspector of Prisons keeps banging on about. But anyway, so we've seen that you will have yourself built. So by that same argument applies now. You can say, well, if you're near a prison and you ain't flying a DJI, we know you're a bad actor. So you've already got that ability to say good actor, bad actor. And yet it is doing absolutely nothing and nobody's really achieving anything except for the fact, I mean, I think the last two that have been caught, these drones for contraband, are members of the public, the NIMBYs, looking out the windows and seeing the blokes in vans going, oh, they're looking a little bit dodgy. And so they've been caught that way rather than any super fancy solution or even processes that we're putting in place. So, yeah, I'd always keep saying, it's the fair comment of now we've already got that ability. And that's not captured in the business case either. So that strikes me as, again, either some more incompetence or dishonesty, where you're saying this is a business case. And you should actually say, we have this system already. So this is a form of duplication. But really it's just justifying things. Honestly, if you weren't saying Gatwick and you were missing all this other stuff, you can say, if someone says we are introducing this because we want to make it pay to fly, blah blah blah, BV loss, you can't argue about it because you've got an honest business case there. So you can say I disagree with that, or that annoys me, but at least it is fundamentally honest at its core, and people will actually appreciate that. It actually knocks people more when they see narratives being put there, which they know themselves a complete nonsense. If you see the Gatwick now, people are just like, straight away you're just like, no, and it's going to get, it's really going to push people down non-compliance, because it was quite interesting this when the rich stuff was coming up. There were loads, especially in your FPV races, of people saying absolutely no way about putting this on. I'm sick and tired of this, and it's all because things are being built around narratives that, instead of just being people just being fundamentally straight, it really does, irks people when you feel there's a deception at the root of what's being thrust upon you. So I just wanted to jump in with that. Sorry for speaking over you there, Richard. It was just because that's the point where people always, they think that's the argument that's just perfect. You can't defeat this argument, and it's like, yeah, you can.
Yeah, you're right. The thing that's really annoying is we're trying to solve a problem that does not yet exist. They've got much bigger problems to solve. I see another business jet went down to a neighborhood in America this week. Yeah, crashed. These planes are falling out of the sky all the times. In the UK, you got cars driving into crowds of people. As far as safety and security threat goes, drones are not a problem. So why is so much effort being spent trying to regulate, especially at the recreational hobby level, small drones? They're not going to be carrying anything that's dangerous. They're not going to be doing any spying that can't be done with Maxar and satellites orbiting overhead by friendly nations. I just don't understand. And they have to produce these fake narratives because there's no actual genuine case to support all this stuff that's going on.
I think I agree with the sentiments. Again, remote ID is and always has been a very emotive topic. And just to set our stall out again, we don't care where the ID comes from, but it would be very nice if it was trustworthy, and it'd be very nice if we didn't have to broadcast it. And certainly the one thing that we still don't comply with today is broadcasting the remote pilot's location. There seems to be no actual safety use case for that. That's a security one. And we're not a security company, and that's not the area that we develop products for. That doesn't also feel like a UTMSP or a CIS level function, right? So again, can't really understand, unless someone comes knocking with the force of law, that we're going to be complying with that. It doesn't seem to make sense. But the argument, I think it comes back to this. There is significant infrastructure investment around the world at the moment in so-called counter UAS. In other words, systems whose primary function initially is to detect the presence of drones, some of which then have some form of effector capability, usually electronic, some sort of jamming. Now, the argument that I've heard, which again, I think just from a data perspective, this makes more sense. Very, very simply, if you're a drone radar and you're really good at spotting drones, and you're really good at putting those drones on a map at an airport, then you have a problem, because there are just more and more of them annually. And so your drone radar is just showing how clever you are. And you've gone from seeing one drone, which was a scary thing, to seeing, 500 a week. How do you know which ones are the ones that are problematic? And so I think the argument is just, it's a numbers argument. If most people comply, and most people will comply, right? I don't think there will be mass non-compliance, but especially if you're just Joe Public and you go buy a DJI drone or whatever it is, you're already going to comply, because it's going to have the mark in it. So I don't know, let's just say, for argument's sake, more than 90% of all the drones will broadcast it, then suddenly your sensors make a little bit more sense to you.
That said, Richard, 90% already are. We are primarily in the UK, DJI, and it's already transmitting. We've already got the drone ID, and this is the problem. We're as a nation, we are already compliant completely. Except for those small use cases, which would be the same small use cases under RED.
Yeah, sorry to jump in. I think the counter argument I've heard for that does kind of make sense, is that it's effectively a proprietary standard, right? And actually, with a firmware update, DJI can wipe that national detection capability out overnight. Now, by putting it into legislation and requiring some compliance for a mark and having an open standard that anyone can implement, anyone who is dependent on that standard can effectively insulate themselves from the whim of a single company.
That said, though, giving everything to DJI could equally as well just put a firmware out that wiped off RID. So if you're going to say that argument, it's also still true if they had RID implemented.
The argument I'm making is that only DJI can comply with DJI standard, right? As opposed to a national standard, which everyone can comply with and is going to be compelled to comply with unless they want to stop.
The point being, there isn't everyone else. If there was, that's the problem, is that the market we're in, the reality we're in, is everyone, you have DJI. It's not like the camera world where you've got your Canon, your Nikon, your Sony, your Panasonic. It's you've got a DJI or you're building something yourself. That's really the truth of it. And that's the problem is, when no one is discussing the truth, the facts of the way the UK, and to be honest, it's not just the UK. It's more or less panned out like that globally. It's sad that that's the situation, and we haven't got our own drone markets, but effectively we haven't. It's all DJI, so it's all there. And the same way they could turn off drone ID, which there's no incentive for them to do. They could do the same with RID. Obviously, I don't see they're ever going to do that because they don't want to upset everyone. But I understand that particular argument. For me, it doesn't justify.
No, I'm not trying to give you a justification. I'm trying to give you the explanations that I've heard.
Oh yeah.
These are the arguments.
You were trying to justify that.
But I come back to the same point. It doesn't matter what standard, whether we're talking about the DJI one or RID. Problem is, it's easy to spoof and hard to enforce. There's no validation in that. The actual people that you probably care about from a risk perspective are not the people who are compliant. So I come back to, again, this is you might have different requirements from a security perspective, and there are different security experts out there. I do safety, and from a safety perspective and navigation, you can definitely make the argument that seeing more is very helpful, but not if I can't trust what I'm seeing. And that's why we built the Arrow Towers, right? To verify what we're looking at. And let's just extend this problem. This is not a drone problem. This is actually an aircraft problem, right? I can't trust that the majority of aircraft at low altitude will be carrying an ADS-B transponder, or that I will receive it using any one of the professional receivers that we put in. So again, we have these other problems that carry over into quote unquote traditional.
Well, that's.
And that probably you can bet that someone's.
But that is the problem, though, isn't it? That's the thing that we're missing. We're fiddling around with all this fire putting out stuff when we should be making a modern digital sky, a modern digital airspace. All of us want a safe sky. All of us want to operate safely with current users, being model aircraft flyers, drone flyers, of course, except Bruce, drone flyers private and drone flyers commercial. Everybody wants a safe sky, and we're not moving forward with that. We're moving forward little piecemeal things that let's have a major change. It's 2025. We've been talking about RID for more than 10 years, haven't we? It's like, don't need it.
It's fresh news, and it's Simon in the comments. Although he hasn't done it as a freedom of information, so he's done it on just a question to the CAA, relying on their goodwill to answer. So he'd asked a number of questions around RID, but I thought it was particularly interesting. He asked if the CAA have performed any kind of risk assessment on the risk to remote pilots on their location being transmitted. Now, the CAA refusing to discuss that, saying, well, we haven't spoken to DFT, etc., blah, blah, blah. But it just strikes me that whatever stage you're in with RID, you could quite clearly at any stage now just say, yes, we have considered it. No, we haven't. And if yes, I don't understand why there's any need to shield that. That's the kind of thing, again, I think ought to be transparent, and it would reassure.
Oh, was it me?
You? The assassins have got him. The assassins have finally.
Well, there we are, ladies and gentlemen, live.
It was only a matter of time.
It was. It was definitely only a matter of time. And
his door's being broken down. Oh, that's it. He's all gone.
Yeah. He's okay.
But he's right. The only reason they'd suppress that information is if it doesn't support their case.
Yeah.
Look, I think this full airspace digitization is a really wonderful concept. Like the general feeling that everything should generally transpond kind of makes sense, right? I think what we all prefer though is if by 2040 we're not transponding in the clear, and we're not doing it on, say, the ISM wave band for anyone to intercept, and that we thought about privacy and security, objects that need to be in the sky that don't always need to be broadcasting, etc., etc., etc. We have got to address these things before we bake these in as the very foundations, and that's the danger that we're currently steaming towards, and we're doing that probably not because there's a clear set of justifications for doing it. It's that someone's got to do something, right? And that seems to be my take. I mean, I could be completely wrong, and I'm happy to be corrected by any government minister that's actually got a credible plan and can explain that plan to a bunch of technical people, and can answer whether very clearly in a very simple phrase, is this a security thing that you're solving for, or is this a safety one? And then, depending on how we answer that, we then ask the question: and does this get us closer to beyond visual line of sight in the UK, or does it draw us further apart, or does it do nothing? I still haven't seen that information anywhere today.
Josh has got to go, so we'll bid him farewell. Thanks for
Just
coming.
remember,
Thanks
all birds need remote ID.
They do.
Birds
They
aren't
do.
real.
You're absolutely.
Oh, freak.
Birds aren't real.
I had two
Birds
birds
aren't
like in
real.
April.
Oh, yeah.
And those are the concerns. But anyway, see you guys. Have a good one.
Take care, Josh.
See you, Josh.
All right, look after yourself, Josh. Cheers. Good. I'm glad.
The other thing is that America's been running RID for how long now? And I'd like some information. How many offences have been solved through RID? How many bad occurrences have been prevented by RID? How has RID performed during the 2 years it's been in operation? Is it worth the expenditure when you look at the benefits? It's got to be a return on investment thing. Has there been a return on that investment? And what is the size of that return so that other countries don't make a mistake by just copying a mistake?
To be honest, you've got your answer by the fact that the FAA put ashore on the case to start checking out counter drone solutions. For me, the fundamental point is, if you are developing any kind of detection system, if you're starting from the point that everything has to be conspicuous and the device has to transmit you onto a loser, and that's why, I mean, I realize there's pros and cons with every solution. And I know with Arrow Towers, your competitors would say, well, it will be a more expensive solution, and that would be true. However, you're working from, and anyone else doing this, I congratulate you if you will go from this assumption, but your assumption should be there's traffic there that isn't conspicuous, that's up to mischief, and we should just try and detect everything and build a picture that way. And we all know that doing that, it's never going to be 100%, but if that's your aim at the outset, you're going to be far more successful than any other solution. Because if you're saying you've got to be conspicuous, we know straight away the people that are going to cause the mischief, that are going to be the problem, aren't going to comply.
So all I would add is, look, remember why we built the towers, right? And that was so that we could spot 99% of everything rather than 100% of everything that wants to be seen, or is specifically carrying equipment that you need. So, and the other thing I would say is, for anyone that's watching and doesn't understand what the Arrow technology is, it was very specifically built so that our customers who actually wanted to opt in to a solution to go beyond visual line of sight, ideally autonomously over time, that they could opt into that without impact to any other airspace user, whether that's a drone user, or more importantly, I think for something like the low altitude flying, GA, like police helicopters and air ambulances, etc., who otherwise can't see you. So our goal there was to sort of try and find an interim solution, where interim is between 2018 and 2040, by the way, an interim solution that meant that commercial industry could actually make use of these automated technologies without having to buy any one company's specific hardware, whether that's a drone or a hook-on device, or requiring specifically different designations of airspace of ultimately amounting to some kind of segregation, right, or restriction, to be able to do all of that without changing anything anyone else is doing. So I come back to my early point right at the start. I really don't care what happens with RID. I just don't think that we should all be using RID unless we're all clear about what it's actually going to do and in what context. And like I say, if it's a security concern, fine. But why does that particular concern a UTM? UTM already issues IDs to its own customers and always has. This is about us being able to understand the identity of other customers or other UTM's customers and users, which arguably we don't care about. We're not delivering services to those people, right? So again, I come back to, you've got to have some way, even if you're given a signal, you have to be able to trust that signal. Otherwise, you might as well do everything in the clear. And that is kind of what broadcast ID is, right? It's all in the clear.
Yeah. Oh well, I have to address red. Yeah, red card. Sensible chat. Red card. Well done, Bruce. Yeah.
You had to invite him back on, didn't you, Gary? Eh? The sense of the voice of reason. Yeah.
Well, we encrypt most of the signals that we care about, right? Like, think about drone control signals. You guys, even if you're building a drone, there is a level of encryption between the controller and the drone. Because why not? Because you lose control of that drone pretty quickly, wouldn't you? If someone else was able to just, I don't know, send a 1 instead of a 0 and crash your vehicle. So when it comes to something as important as identity, why do we feel that is actually less important than control over your own drone? Like, that's your identity. How do I verify that identity? What is identity if I can't verify it? What does it mean? Today, if I want one of you to prove your identity to me, you will have to produce a paper document. That, in one instance, that paper document you could have actually received at birth, however long ago that was.
Papers, please. Papers, please. Didn't we fight a war to avoid that?
So I think there are some European countries actually have electronic identities, right? That you can actually produce an app and show, an officer of the law your actual identity. I'm not saying I support that or not, but at least that is slightly more in keeping with where we're at today as a society, right? We do everything on our phones. There's a level of cryptography in that, and arguably that's safer than a piece of A4 paper that was printed back in 1980 when I was a kid. So. Again, it comes back to
modern, brand new bit of paper, brand new paper.
But this cryptography thing, I mean, still, they're not even encrypting the pilot's position, which they could do to avoid public scrutiny with the RID signal. Cryptography is there. They could use it to conceal that information from the general public, but they choose not to in the standard. Why not?
Well, I think there's some technical people that have probably won an argument there that they lost elsewhere, which is, I don't know if anyone saw the news a couple of months ago about Apple and the UK and their advanced data protection and having to pull that out because the UK government allegedly wanted them to have a backdoor in iPhone encryption. And Apple rightly said, no, thank you. We're not going to do that. And somehow this news leaked because it was a sealed order. So now the news is out. And actually, probably what's happened in remote ID is people have turned around and said, well, you can't make us put a back door in it. If we put a back door in it,
they won't need a back door because the government will have the keys anyway.
So now we've just got no door, right? And then no one's to blame for losing the back door keys. And, I don't think that's a particularly good excuse, but that certainly seems to be where we're at, right? So we just broadcast it all in the clear. And that's the point. Remote ID, our ID, the I is something we should all really care about in this instance. That identification. What does it mean if I can't trust it? If I can't verify it as a UTM or just as Joe Public? What is the purpose of it?
Well, it just comes back. Blockchain, Gary.
Blockchain, all the way.
Someone will say blockchain, right? There's probably someone in the comments right now talking about blockchain, but the only thing I would go back to there is this garbage in, garbage out principle. It doesn't matter what you put in the blockchain, or rather, blockchain doesn't make your data good. It just makes us all agree that is what you put on the blockchain. I don't really understand the purpose of that argument in and of itself in that regard.
AI will fix it.
Come back to, someone's got to have an authoritative source of this stuff. And someone's got to have a mechanism, maybe something like public key.
Oh, here comes trouble.
Why not just use what you've been using?
Oh, he's back from the pub and live from the Coach and Horses.
I've got a green screen in that pub and he's put his shit in the back.
Yeah, he has.
I think you're all very nasty against RID and it solves all of the problems. And I think you've all got too cynical. It's going to fix everything.
Well, what's missing here is a sign in the back that says "Sponsored by the DFT."
Afternoon.
Well, it's. I mean, I'm very nice to see you. I didn't mean this to really deteriorate into this perpetual RID conversation that we have, but it's definitely on the radar now in the UK, and people are beginning to wake up to it. I personally think it's going to end up being network remote ID, and it certainly can't be. You know, on my desk, there's 2 devices I can spoof RID with just on my desk, just right here. It can't turn into a system like that.
Just one quick thing before we continue, because I glitched before and I thought you'd heard enough of it, but Simon said I didn't. So with Simon, he'd asked for the risk assessments he's done about the risk to pilots from their transmission being broadcast. They're refusing to provide that, which means they've either done it or they haven't done it, or I don't know. But it'd be nice. That's the kind of thing, if you were transparent about, people would have a lot more reassurance in regulation and the thought process behind it, and the evidence you've actually considered the issues that really concern everyone from your hobbyists through to your commercial users, because that's the main thing that concerns people. Is, well, there's probably 2 sides to it. People are concerned about, first and foremost, about their personal position being broadcast, and I think in this country we'd have more of a fight of it, because actually I don't think there was a technical question around this. From the chats with Brendan, the US doesn't have the same regard for privacy as we do over here and in Europe, and so that's why I'm quite surprised that Europe adopted it the way it did. But certainly in the US, they were kind of tough luck, you're not having any privacy, where over here I think you get the information commissioner involved, and I think there would be concerns about privacy. So that's the first one. The second one's really the scope creep about it being used to issue charges and fines, and where does it stop? We all see how the way councils work with the motorist, and that will be happening to drone users, and obviously no one's going to welcome that. And there's also the general concern about the privacy of data. Once you get to network remote ID and you've got history, we've already seen in the last few weeks, there's actually commentators from abroad, like the guy that runs Have I Been Pwned, where you put in your email address and it tells you if you've ever been a part of a hack, and everyone's going, what is going on in the UK? We are just leaking data out everywhere, and most recently it was the courts when you're going for legal aid. It's entire history. I think it goes back like something like 10 years, and all this data of people's criminal convictions, all this really, really, seriously private stuff has now been put into, essentially, onto the dark web, which is good as being in the public domain, because there's going to be lots of people with their hands on that data. So that kind of just keeps saying time and time again, we are being completely incompetent at keeping people's data safe. And if you actually have a look at a lot of the job adverts for the roles of actually doing the cyber security, it's really low wages. There are call center jobs, literally call center managers jobs, that are paying more than what we're paying cyber security people. And against that backdrop, it's just, people just don't have that assurance that we should have, that the data is going to be safe if the government are holding it. And those are the kind of issues that need to be addressed, for people to say, you know what, I'm fine with it because you've addressed all these. But that's where we're just getting, again, it's, no, we're not even going to talk about it. If you're going to say, well, I'm not talking about it, I'm not being transparent about it, people are just going to be, why should I trust you? So sorry, that's me jumping in again.
I think you're overthinking this, and I think it's all overthinking. I think this is as simple as this. They got to do something. They can't do nothing, because when something bad happens and they did nothing, they'll be accused of doing nothing. Doing something is better than nothing. That something might be complete nonsense, make no sense, have no basis in reality, but by doing something means when the bad thing happens, they've got an excuse. And then they'll have someone to blame the people who told them to do the something, and it'll offload it off on the politicians' backs. And it's all about blame. And it's all about when the bad thing happens. I don't think there's any basis in reality, and I don't think there's any. You won't find anything that will back up doing what they're doing makes sense. It's simply what's the quickest and easiest thing they can do. Everyone else has done it. Do that, and that's, I think, where it is.
Definitely red card. Definitely too sensible. Yeah, it's spot on, right? Really. Well, how disappointing when Richard could be leading the way with helping make a modern digital sky, or having a really good. Richard should have been allowed to have a proper year's trial of this already. We should have had it. We should have seen whether it worked or not. We might be saying, well, oh, Richard, why didn't that bit work? Or that bit worked really well. But it should have happened by now. It shouldn't have taken this long. It should have happened. There's no reason why there couldn't have been a corridor open for that. And it was a fine system for it. So it's ridiculous. It's holding the UK back in the drone world. And not everybody's from the UK. But the UK was ahead. So while we've got you here, Ian from the pub, tell us about all the latest RC thingamajigs. You and Bruce, tell us what's all the latest things, or is it all died down now that the tariffs are in and China's not selling anything to anyone? Oh, here we are, Pico ADSB. That's going to be one thing.
Yeah, you're on mute, Bruce. You're still on mute.
He's still on mute. That's fine. That's how we prefer him.
No. The world's smallest ADSB receiver.
Receiver.
What is it? Receiver. Smaller than the Pico, whatever. What's that other thing? Pico ADSB? Yeah. It's smaller than the
Uvionics one. Is it?
Yeah, it's smaller than the Uvionics one. Yeah, it is. I measured it. Only marginally, just fractionally.
Is there a battery?
It is. No, it's a receiver. It's the ADSB receiver.
So you just need to power it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I kind of wonder. Yeah. There's obviously uses for that. But they sent that to me. I'm going to have a look at it and see how it works. I don't know what the price is. That ping was at $275, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Well, it's free in the cube. Free in the cube.
Yeah. It's interesting. Things have quietened down. The tariffs now, all of the retailers that sort of jumped very early are now having to change, because the reality is the 143 or whatever it was in the end never actually hit. We didn't actually have that real number. What is actually quite interesting is the Mavic 4 launch is incredibly interesting when you look at it, that DJI launched a flagship product not available in the largest market, and that is a very interesting tell. But also they're pushing ahead. There's something like 8 new products in the pipeline for the rest of this year. They're not slowing down. But I think what you see this year is just how far ahead they are now. And I know they've always been ahead, but when you look at the new products now, it's crazy just how far ahead of everyone there is. And they're about to push again with all of the new enterprise stuff. What will be interesting is how that lands, because obviously the US is a very different world. And let's be honest, DJI Enterprise is a solid product. Look, let's be honest, if you're going to run a business or if you were search and rescue, what would you want to get the job done? The truth is, you're going to want to pick up a Mavic Thermal, you're going to want an M300 or an M50, because nothing else really comes close. But what will be interesting is how they land. But yeah, it's all quite quiet. A lot of the Chinese manufacturers have really pulled everything back, other than DJI. Everything else has just pretty much gone on stop. I don't know, Bruce might be different, but I don't have a pre-release product here. I haven't had a pre-release product for about the last 3 months, and I am not really aware of anything coming up either. Everything is just dead at the moment in the release world. I don't know about you, Bruce. Is it the same?
Yeah, but I expect they're doing very nicely thanks to Ukraine anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Rev's saying DJI is military tech now, but absolutely.
Well, also, did you see the USA? There's moves. They want them to ban this or nix this Golden Dome thing and instead build millions of drones.
Yeah.
So what happens? Where do the bits come from?
Yeah, and it's I don't know how long Autel can hang on. It's interesting when you look at the other players like Skydio have vanished out of the consumer space. They're just selling golden toilet seats to the military now. In essence, it's a $10,000.
Well, we're going to be getting them now because we had to go cap in hand to America and to be told off, and a whole load of lies told about South Africa. But we're acquiescing on two things: Starlink, which we didn't want to have here, and we're saying, oh, please, Skydio, and oh, please bring your fantastic technology here. So it was going to end up here by backdoor means, I suppose. But
yeah, and it's but I really the drone game is over. Really, it's DJI and there's a few other players, but I also don't even. The market is shrinking. Far less commercial operators than there's ever been. I don't even know if I reckon half of the people I knew who were commercial ops have given up. At least half, which is insane in the UK. Have drones become normal? Not really. If you walk around parks, I don't know about you, Richard, and Ian in the UK, you don't go places and see Mavics every day. You see the odd person, don't you, now and again at a beauty spot or something. But we're 5 years in from the drone revolution, and they're still not the norm. They're still that unusual.
I'm still waiting for the year of the network.
Yeah.
I think what is more of the norm, though, is that people talk about them all the time now in the media, right? And I'm not just talking about recent events in the last 2 years, the drone wars, but 8 years ago, when a drone made the news, it was because a Phantom had landed on the White House lawn, and it was a very bad thing. Today, everyone's talking about drones all the time. There's drone footage all over the internet. We've all seen it in our social feeds. That's much more normal. But you're right. Our offices in Reading, basically, you can see all across the horizon, and very rarely do I see any drones out there. In fact, the most exciting thing is literally everyone in our office was pressed up against the windows the other day was because there's a construction firm across the way and they had a couple of drones up, and then everyone ran over to dronesafetymap.com to see if they'd put flight reports in, and very luckily they had. So, but again, it's still quite a rare occurrence to see it, and I think most people in my own network don't have a drone, right? It's a very unusual thing to have.
So would you have enough? Would you have enough data? Sorry, would you have enough data, Richard, to prove to show that? To show, look, 3 years ago it looked like this, and now it looks like this. Could you see a decline in the traffic?
I have to find it. One of our guys did a fantastic visualization of flight reports in the UK. So this is for anyone that doesn't know, anyone can submit a flight report to AA. You can do it through something like Mission Planner and our plugin. You can do it through partners, or you can do it direct on our own apps and services. And we get tens of thousands of those every month. But that's kind of like the lowest form of accuracy that we would have in a platform, because it's given to us, right? It's not transmitted. It's something that someone inputs and they could fly it or not fly it, versus something we observe, which is going to have the highest form. And just that map alone showed hundreds of thousands of spots appearing over the UK in the last 2 years, many of them in FRZs, many of them in areas that people wouldn't have thought that you would have seen drones. And remember, this isn't us detecting them. This is people actually telling us where they're actually flying. So if someone's telling you they're flying, in an FRZ, they've either not understood what the FRZ is or that it's there at all, which is odd if they're doing it via our apps, because it will literally be screaming at them if that's what they're doing, or they're having a laugh, right? And I don't see a lot of people registering accounts and just trying to do it for a giggle. What gets more interesting is, whilst I think, Gary, you mentioned it earlier, why aren't CAA looking at all the data we have? I still don't know that. I've spoken to several directors in the CAA and just said, I don't know where you're getting your data, but we'd like to contribute to this decision-making process because we have a lot of it. All the towers that we built have been online now, as in continuously 24/7 for basically 2.5 years. And the early prototypes much sooner than that. We now have a whole network of EC, so ADSB, MODES, FLARM, ADSB on 1090 and 978, I think it is, plus broadcast remote ID. We have dozens and dozens of those receivers up and down the country, mostly all airside, these big high antenna masts. Those correlate quite stunningly with the self-reported locations in a high number of outcomes, which tells us that that's probably not, or the majority of people are not spuriously reporting. They're actually reporting and then going to fly, and they're being observed and witnessed doing that.
So is DJI got RED enabled on craft in Britain, even though it's not needed?
Well, yes and no. So not older DJI drones don't have that capability.
Yeah.
I think
But
even
new ones
some of
do.
the earlier ones, someone in the comments might know more. Counter's not really my area, but I think some of the earlier drones aren't even compatible with the Aeroscope system, I think, that they released.
There's one or two drones they put out that aren't compatible with it. I have a feeling the original Avata wasn't, although I might have dreamt that. But
No, the Avata, anything that's OcuSync based should be compatible because it's an SDR. Lightbridge gets difficult. So, for instance, the Mavic 4 Pro version 2, there's a version of that which wasn't compatible, but pretty much anything they've made in the last few years they can. But it is a lot, it's a software rewrite, so it's how far they want to go. At the end of the day, how far do you want to invest? The problem with RID is it's dead money to them. If they go back and rewrite the software to include something on a 3-year-old drone and it breaks other things, they've then got to spend all that development time, as Richard will know, and developers are free, aren't they, Richard? You don't pay for them at all. They're like little, they turn up,
Elves.
they beaver away.
Users think so, yeah.
Yeah, they turn up, beaver away, and disappear overnight. And it's not like they're expensive or anything like that.
AI, mate.
AI, yeah, but
Well, I suppose developers are cheaper than the testing, right? Like
Yes.
the regression testing is insanely expensive ultimately, but you need
But
good
it-
developers to do it, right?
yeah, and AI will put all of these people out of work anyway. What is interesting when you look at drones, though, and I was thinking about this earlier compared to AI, people were talking about drones will be the next disruptive technology, and it really hasn't happened. And if you look in the very short period of how AI has propagated versus other things, I almost think we've hit peak with drones already. And whilst you will
Well,
see,
didn't we say that 5 years ago?
I think
I
you
don't
see-
think we've hit peak.
Yeah.
I think we've hit the ceiling. And I think
Yeah,
that's
ceiling,
the difference. The ceiling is, I think what's interesting about this technology versus some others, for instance, is that this technology has an artificial ceiling, and that's called regulation. In virtually all jurisdictions around the world, innovation in regulation is prohibited, right? There is no experimental part of the legislation. It is extremely difficult to do anything with a drone in virtually all locations where you are trying to do it because you have a business case. If you would like to go and do it somewhere in the sandy plains of Utah, you're probably going to be okay, but you're probably still going to do it in a big no-tand flight restriction. So the tools just don't exist legislatively in virtually all areas. And the closest we got in the UK, it was even named a sandbox, right? Which I've always found amusing because that is literally a child's plaything. That is not an area where we go do business and intense research. That is an area that we put together for fun, right? There is nothing we can do commercially in a sandbox that can translate to the real world. For instance, a detection sandbox made no sense to us because all other aircraft were banned from it. So when we're trying to prove the efficacy of our detection system and someone says, put it in a sandbox, the very first thing you say is, what are you expecting the results to be? Because doing this will be very costly for us, but everyone else is banned. So this industry, I don't think has seen the peak because it can't see the peak. Right? It can't see the peak because it's.
But they're also too difficult to use still. And if you take this, like this is, if you think about it, what's the biggest market? People taking videos of themselves, people, family, kids. This is still too big, too noisy, too much hassle for the people around you compared to a smartphone on a stick. And actually, even when it comes down to it, a smartphone on a stick works better than this does. And as far as we've got, unless you have a very real business or want to fly drones, like for business, there's no question, game changing if you add deliverables into what you do, whether you're a builder, like you were saying there earlier, Richard, a building site, tracking what you're doing, whether that's marketing, but also whether it's about providing the client updates. But when it comes to everyday people, there's still a little bit too much hassle, and that's what's holding them back.
I think
But
the big,
it-
big drone stuff, where you see a lot of the big drone use cases commercially, is things like crane replacement.
Yeah.
You know, where it just be too costly to do something else, right? So it's much cheaper for us to just put up, a drone. Even if we got to pay $3,000 a day or $3,000 for half a day of drone pilots, it's far cheaper than faffing with all the permits and all the application process and all the delays and then the expensive crane. But that's because at the moment, drones to most companies are simply flying cameras, right? That's all they can do today. Now, that is still immense value to a company that really, really needs it. But that's why to most consumers, it's toys. And for most businesses, it's just a flying camera. And I remember 5 years ago, all the rage was real estate or estate agents, right? Everyone is going to put their house on the market. Everyone's going to have a drone, 360 of their house. I mean, we're looking for a new house, and I haven't seen a single house on the market with any drone footage at all. So
they've all got it here. They all got it here just because their kids are going
And
to dress up. Richard was really right about this artificial ceiling, because if you look at the way drones have struggled to get any kind of growth because of the regulations, compare it to AI. The governments are prepared to set aside legislation such as copyright protection to boost the growth of AI. So they're actually dismantling rules or saying these rules no longer apply to you because you're big tech and you want to be able to scrape the internet for everything, so copyright won't apply. And look at what it's done to the growth of AI. Taking that regulatory restrictions out enables stuff to grow at incredible pace. So imagine what drone technology would be like if we didn't have these ridiculous regulations in place.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I lean into that analogy and say, we've all lived through COVID, right? We've all experienced COVID.
Except Gary, he's dead.
But I think, I'm going to take the UK out of this, but let's say, for instance, where would we be as a society, regardless of your view on vaccines? A lot of people would argue that they saved countless lives. And if you are one of those people who you think they've saved countless lives, then the question simply would be, if an aviation regulator was the medicines regulator, would we have expressed the testing? Would we have expressed the rollout of a life-saving medicine? Or would simply hundreds of millions of people now be dead? And coming back to Airspace World, I gave a talk, and in a talk, it lasted about 22 minutes. And there's a stat that somewhere in Europe, about every 6 minutes, a person dies needlessly waiting for a defibrillator, right? Because it gets stuck in traffic or they're too far from one. Every 6 minutes. So that meant in my talk, at least 3 people did it. At least for once, not generally because of the content. But the point I was trying to make was, it's generally accepted that each minute that you go after that sort of 6 minute period, your chances of surviving go down by 10%. So God forbid you're waiting, 16 minutes because you're dead. Now, what frustrates me is 10 years ago, there was a crazy Swiss company trying to put defibrillators on drones. Now they exist, right? And they're actually flying around. They're actually saving lives on a daily basis, but not in virtually any, not in any way they could be. It's all test.
Yeah, but all the cops have got tasers now. You don't need a defib.
Well, you need a shock, right? That's what you need. But generally speaking, what frustrates me is all of the people in the room are decision makers at some point in the chain for prohibiting that technology from taking flight. So the only question I've got is, why is it in aviation we tolerate this level of ambivalence to technologies which could actually make a significant difference to people's lives? It's no longer a pipe dream. 10 years ago, people were saying that's mad, that will never happen. Well, now there's tens of millions of dollars being spent on that. There are medical services saying, God, we would give our right hands for this technology because it's killing them, watching their patients die because they're stuck at a red light or they're stuck in a queue of traffic. So why the hell do we tolerate such ambivalence and such apathy from our general regulatory regime globally for aviation when we don't do it in any other domain? In fact, any other domain that I'm aware of. There might be one, but no one's pointed it out to me yet. But I look at it and I just get frustrated because, like you guys, you're all engineers, right? You solve problems. You come up with an idea, you build a thing, you prove the thing works, and then maybe you do something amazing with the thing. But the bottom line is, you see a problem, you fix the problem. Now, every single one of us have seen the problem in drones, or seen the problem that the absence of drones has caused, and we've come up with a myriad use cases for fixing it. What's changed?
Epaulets. It's all about epaulets.
Material has changed.
It is. It's the feeling of superiority associated with aviation administration.
Maybe.
Don't you know who we are? How dare you question us and bring facts into the argument?
Well, Karma's a wonderful thing. I was once told. So after I got off the stage, someone came up to me and said, "Well, you don't need to worry for long, Richard." I said, "Well, why is that?" And they went, "Well, most of the people making these decisions within the next 20 years will probably be in need of one of those defibrillators that they won't get anyway. So this is a self-solving problem." And I thought, it's either very morbid or very clear. But no one wants to wait 20 years, right? And whether it's that altruistic, drone saving lives, or actually it's just drones revolutionizing business, why the hell can't we test these things in a way that is safe? And the answer is, actually, we can. So actually, that's not the question to be asking. Is why can't the regulators find a way to get comfortable with the level of risk posed by drones? And the reality is, they are slightly risky, right? But that's the point. They seem to be much less risky than all other forms of aviation that I'm aware of, whether you think about GA or rockets, for instance.
How many rescue helicopters have crashed over the years?
Oh, well, one last week, wasn't there?
Yeah, there you go. So they're prepared to risk lives to save lives. Why can't we?
Submarine implosions.
There are many that push for the elimination of risks in aviation related to drones, and that frustrates me, and it should frustrate any actual aviator, because aviation has never been about the elimination of risk. It's been about the management of risk. We accept risk. ANSPs have huge insurance policies to deal with the 1 in a million, 1 in 5 million, 1 in 10 million risk, because they happen, right? But why in drones does that have to be zero?
And a perfect record will never be good enough.
No, or it's good enough until it isn't. That's the problem, right? So anyway, I thank you for inviting me on to get on my high horse. I shall.
No, sadly, well, no.
Next week,
we've missed your dressage. Yeah, we've missed your wise words, and you're not wrong. It is insane, isn't it? And I suppose. No, well, do I mention it? Well, I did. I did a thing. I did a thing this week. Let me show you the thing I did. But I first did this thing. Is the screen coming up? Yeah, I first did this thing in 2009 with a fixed-wing aircraft, and quite by chance, this old Canon camera Nixus, and it was finding. Sorry.
How old are you?
Yeah, quite so. Yes, quite so. But well, let's share.
How did you stop the flash powder from blowing off the wing?
Absolutely, the flash powder. So this was looking for eggs for a particular bird. There's 302 of them left in South Africa. So I'm not going to say what it is. I'm not going to say where it is. And I had to go and do this exercise again for reasons this week. And so the first time round, 16 years ago, I had to stitch these things together with photos. Had to do this, had to do that, had to come home, had to get some PC, had to do everything. And it took me half a day. And this time I did it, and in 10 minutes with that little 249 gram Autel, I found one, and the one, and there it is. There's the egg. So the technology has come on. What I was trying to say with this is that the technology really has come on a great deal. It's a
scorched bit from the lipo fire where the drone crashed. That's
exactly right. Yes, that's right.
And then
that was the end of the bird. Yes, 309 now, or whatever it is. Yeah. But it's all safer, it's all easier, it's all very well tested. I mean, how many millions of hours have DJI drones flown now, for instance? It will be millions. It will be millions. And it started off at 6 minutes at a time, and now it's about 40. It's time to take some risks out there, regulators. Come on.
That's my motto.
Let's get on with it.
Since I've been flying non-compliantly, not deliberately flouting rules, but using my own best judgment in all cases, not one person has died. No property's been damaged. I've been doing it for 2 years now, and I rest my case.
Yeah. We've got to move on, and Richard made very, very valid use cases. And as to that ceiling, well, I would argue that, I would hope we're actually just reaching we've got to reach the boring stage where those things are just doing the dull, dangerous, and dirty jobs, and that's it. And they're boring, and we don't care. Yeah, we don't care. We don't care about the drones because they're just doing work. and that's that. They're not flash. They're not new. They haven't got this. Haven't got that. We don't care. We're just doing a job and actionable data for somebody.
Do you worry that the fact
regulators
that they're now? Do you worry the fact that they're now the primary weapon of battle is going to derail things in the future due to public pushback and things? I mean, we're not all walking around with machetes and guns these days, are we? Even though at one stage we did, but now they're a weapon of war, so you can't have them.
No, I don't think that'll happen. I can't. I don't think so. Well, do you think it will?
I think it'll have an effect. I think that the public perception of drones, there's the privacy issue, and now there's the safety issue, because they see what's going on in Ukraine, and if someone sees a big drone flying around with, you know, in an area that's going to be suspicious, there's always going to be that concern. And then if we could only get the aliens to fit remote ID, this problems would be solved. But speaking of which, before I go, did you see that Archer Aviation has been accused of fraud? Oh dear.
Yeah, Archer and also Red Cat as well today. There's
but not EHang.
thing. Not EHang.
Not EHang. No.
Never EHang. No, we've been going. We should make that very, very clear. We've been going for nearly an hour and a half. What other news have we seen before we go?
In an hour's time, Starship's going up. Hour's time, Starship goes up. So if you want to see some fireworks,
yeah, Philip's there to watch it live. Philip and the team that were at the Cube Pilot gig at AVSI, they've all gone down there to watch. The firework display.
Does he get to like the blue touch paper, or does someone else do that?
maybe. But it's really, and again, reversing back to AVSI, there were very few press releases, really a handful of press releases that came out of it. It was very quiet indeed. I was quite surprised. So I don't know what that means to the market either. And
I don't know.
You scoot back to
back in the 80s, the computer industry, there were trade shows everywhere, and you had to go to them to see the latest and greatest. And then it all kind of died out for a long time, and now it's starting to come back with Comdex and things like that, revitalized. Because the Las Vegas Comdex nearly died at one stage there. There was just no people demonstrating stuff in computer industry. And it's sort of, I think every industry reaches that plateau where it's just boring, samey, and people go, we can't be bothered going. And because the people aren't going, then the people who have displays aren't going, and because they aren't going, it's a vicious circle. And then for some reason, it gets a bit of life back into it, maybe a decade later. So we just have a bit of a sleep, sit back, put your feet up.
Nothing wrong with that. And on that note, sit back, relax, dear viewer. Whatever you're doing. Oh, here we go.
Camera.
I thought we were going to get away with
it. Something that's really
sit back, relax. Here he goes.
Something in the private chat that you can show people. It's just this is a bit funny, and now Richard's here, right? It's something I can just make him aware of for future. I was hoping he might have been able to get on the show today. I didn't know you. I didn't know till last minute you're on today, Richard. But there's a guy that's been on before. It's former police officer Michael Morgan, and he's really keen to learn more about the Arrow Towers. He's just got an interest in he writes books about incidents in airspace. So it's just nice to have a view of what the future might hold. But at the moment, what I was going to mention today, if I can find my email that come through, so bear with me. I get so many, obviously, freedom of information related emails. It's amongst them.
You just told me not to post that. I didn't post that.
Are you posting stuff you shouldn't be posting?
Yeah, well, don't tell me after I've posted it.
Oh
well.
There's bear with me. I should have been a bit more organized here. But yeah, I hate this. It's all my own stuff. Well, let me do a search. So this is why you can't put data in computer systems. It all goes wrong. Oh dear.
We feel like we need the equivalent of on-hold music for the internet
right
now.
Oh yeah. What is that? That's,
get the Casio out. Hang on.
Yeah.
Or would you rather have the Hammond? Maybe the Wurlitzer.
The Richard Hammond. That John Shuttleworth fellow with his little organ thing, comedian, very funny.
I'd say Rolf Harris, but that's
Uh,
not good anymore. You can't say that.
No, you can't say that anymore.
While we wait for Ian to do whatever Ian is doing, head over on dronesafetymap.com, go to Boca Chica in Texas, and have a look at the giant airspace restrictions that exist for the SpaceX launch coming up. Absolutely enormous.
Downwind by 1 bajillion miles. I'm doing it
It's like
right
I fly
now.
my drone, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm going to shoot
exactly.
off. Look after yourselves, gents. I will speak to
All
you
right,
again
mate.
soon.
Good
There
to
is a
see you.
bar.
Take care. Take
Make sure
care.
you keep
Cheers.
moving on.
You just got to
I
keep
have-
down the.
I finally have a link. So this is a link to Michael's FOIAs. So it's worth people
Right.
following these if you want a bit of fun. But I just thought it was quite amusing because in his past life, Mike was actually replying to Freedom of Information requests on behalf of the police. So he knows
okay.
the process.
Oh wow!
He knows all the hoops they'll make you jump through, and he knows when they're being unreasonable. So amongst these, you literally have Mike versus the now legal of the MOD crossing swords in these. So this is the request is doing. So if you're on What Do They Know, it's worth just adding a follow so that you can see these requests, because it's quite the MOD get away with being incredibly unreasonable, really showing complete contempt for the Freedom of Information Act. So it's nice to see a bit of crossing of swords. So they will be going, I'm sure, with Mike stuff and remind certainly to the Information Commissioner this year and possibly on to Tribunal, because they're just being complete flat out. We're not answering, but the MOD have gone to the trouble now of what appears to be getting their own legal rep doing the replies, and they've gone out with every exemption they can do. Yeah, there really is going to be a lot of sort of pushback and fighting for what is basically quite trivial and straightforward information. Obviously, all this relates to Lakenheath.
And so, where is this airspace, Rich? I'm going to try and pull out. Is it somewhere down there?
In Texas, yeah. So there you go. So
Texas.
Yeah.
I'm in the wrong place of the world, part of the world. I was down over here. Texas is over here somewhere, isn't it?
You can just search SpaceX launch facility in the search place at the top.
Could I do that? Could I go SpaceX?
It'll be across the
Launch.
Gulf of America, won't it? Formerly the Gulf of
One word.
Mexico. The Gulf of Trump.
The Gulf. Del Mar. Is this it beginning to
You
come
go,
out
look at
here?
that. Yeah. Keep going. It's
Keep
bigger than
zooming
you
out.
think.
You can't
Keep
zoom out
going.
the top,
Keep
so we
going.
won't
Keep
do it.
going.
Now the
It's that
side.
purple, but keep going.
Zoom in a little bit, but just scroll, and that way
Yeah.
you'll yield more NOTAM. And they just keep going and going, keep going northeast, basically. And this will
I think
just
the world's been grounded.
go north. Like,
So
this will
what,
go on for a very long time. This is one of the reasons
But
why
what-
we break them up, right? Because it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But
This is the Chicken Little
But
zone
what-
because the sky's falling.
but
it
what are
doesn't
they?
feel a lot of confidence, does it? But that's a safety reaction, isn't it? It's what if something goes wrong?
745,000 feet. So what does it tell you? It tells you you can't fly there, or
So that one will tell you slightly less because that's the actual special use airspace. But there's an actual NOTAM, which was the blue one you saw very close in.
right? Okay,
That
let's
will
go
tell
back
you that
to
there
where
are
that.
temporary flight restrictions pursuant to blah 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 due to space operations in the air in the area. Then you get a telephone number to give probably Elon Musk a call because he doesn't have a press office.
Yeah.
If you don't like the fact that there's a NOTAM there right now. But the telephone number's in the bottom for anyone that's particularly interested. Right.
Oh yeah, there it is. Wow. Happy days. Yeah, no. Well, so
It's a
I
bit
know a
flawed,
few of
isn't
the
it? You can't
posts.
zoom out far enough to see the damn thing. Terrible.
Yeah, so CUX. I don't know. I'd get a hold of someone in charge of that if I was able to.
Ring
If
Elon
only
and
I could.
complain.
ring in on and complain. Well, dear viewer, it's definitely time to go. The others have gone. Look after yourselves wherever you are. Enjoy the rocket launch if you're there to see it. And we'll see you again next week at 2100 Gin and Tonic. Look after yourselves, everyone.